the events occurred in Paris, and then the political rhetoric began to heat up around the country. One man stood up very quickly and made a remarkable statement. Jay Inslee, our governor, took a stand which I think is to be highly recommended to everyone in the country. And I said, I stood up and clapped in my office when I saw him, because I thought this is the kind of thing that, unfortunately, we did at this spot 14 years and 2 months ago. That was shortly after 9/11. What's ironic about today is that in 2 days, we're going to celebrate a holiday. That holiday is when a bunch of immigrant, religiously prosecuted pilgrims came to this country and were welcomed into the United States by Native Americans. The celebration is about the fact they helped them to keep from starving after they arrived here in that winter in Massachusetts. And when 9/11 happened, we had some incidents in this area which many of you may have forgotten. A Sikh was almost beaten to death down in Renton. He was running a motel. Somebody mistook him for an Arab terrorist and went after him with a baseball bat. And those kinds of incidents happened all over the place, so we decided that we were going to make Seattle a hate-free zone. Gary Locke and Paul Schell and Ron Sims and I came and said that. Now, I never in my life thought I'd have to be up here doing this again. But sometimes in a society, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and we must not repeat what went on then. The political rhetoric that's going on now is really pretty awful, both in the political campaign and in the Congress, where last week we voted on a resolution that in my view was anti-American. We are in danger in this country of retreating from what our values, who we really are. We can't make our decisions on the basis of panic and fear. That's what we did in 2001. That's what led to the Iraq invasion. That's all of this was a part of that. And in my view, the world is watching us because they're watching to see what kind of moral leadership we will give in this kind of instance. And what's been going on needs to be resisted because it is not who we as Americans are. We must reject bigotry and fear and hate because they provide a false sense of security. You can get this politicians saying things that sound like it makes you security, but it's only in the short run, and it's abandoning our values and our morals. And in the long term, that is destructive to who we are as Americans. And that's why I called my colleagues together to come today and talk about this issue so that Americans see that people in Washington State stand together against that kind of behavior. It is a false division between a tolerant society and a safe society. People are saying, well, you can't be safe if you let everybody in. Well, then the Irish never would have gotten in, nor would the Germans on my mother's side ever gotten in, or a whole bunch of other people. We are a nation of immigrants. We've taken people in and absorbed them, and they become Americans, and that process is not something we can stop now. We can do everything to make it safe. And I commend the president. I say this because I know the process of vetting people coming into this country. I had a young woman come to me, 31 years old, who was an Iraqi, lived in Seattle, and she told me her story because she needed some help with her family. She was a translator for the United States military, she and her brother. And they were all over Baghdad protecting and telling the leadership of the military what was going on. And she said, we did such a good job that the opposition decided to kill us. So they put a mark on she and her brother. They went underground, and it took her 9 months to get from Iraq to the United States. It wasn't just because she'd been a translator or whatever, she suddenly got in with a snap of the fingers. She went through a long process. It then took her 2 years to get her mother and her 3 school-age kids into this country. There is a process in place. It's working. It's very tough to get into this country. And people need to know that, because I don't think we can ignore the fears of people. But that doesn't mean, even though we know their fear, we do not yield to that intolerance that comes with that. Now, I talked with her the other day, and she said the process was long, but I'm sure glad that they did it that way because I feel safe. Now, 14 years ago, Muslim women were afraid to go to the grocery store if they wore the scarf. They were afraid to let their kids go to school in this city because they saw what was happening. There was a family named Hamui who lived up here in the North End. He ran a grocery store. He was a Syrian. And Mr. Hamui and his wife and his oldest daughter were dragged out of their house in the middle of the night, leaving 3 school-age kids in that house. That's the kind of things that were going on, and we have to stand together and create this into what we called in 2001 a hate-free zone. That's where we need to be. I'll hold it up for your camera too. I'm very glad to be joined today, and I don't know if I don't see Adam's on his way, so we're going to go to Dow Constantine, who's the county executive here. 14 years ago it was Ron Sims, now it's Dow. Dow, you're on.
Thank you, Representative McDermott. In the aftermath of the attacks on Paris, there is heightened concern about our nation's security, a concern that I and all elected leaders share. Across this country, however, there are those who would have us abandon our core principles, the principles on which our nation was founded, that America is a beacon of hope and freedom and opportunity. They would have us turn away refugees who are fleeing war-torn Syria, endangering the lives of innocent men, women, and children who have for years suffered at the hands of terrorists and armed militias and their own governments. It's moments like these that test the strength of a nation's character. As the first nation in the world founded on an idea rather than being founded on race or religion or shared origin, but an idea. This is when we demonstrate that our actions reflect our principles. Today, I am proud to declare that King County remains a welcoming community for those people of goodwill from around the world who flee war and tyranny and yearn to breathe free. I know there are leaders of other major urban counties across the United States who share my commitment to helping refugees. And that's why I've invited my peers, the executives of large urban counties and other elected officials, to sign a declaration affirming that we stand united as metropolitan regions. Within the first 24 hours, we had 10 major urban counties sign on. Now more than a dozen, including Cook County, Dallas County, Texas, and Franklin County, which is Columbus, Ohio. We will work together at the local level to send a clear and unified message to our national and state officials that we stand ready to respond to this humanitarian crisis. As Congressman McDermott cautioned, do not fall into the trap, do not fall into the false choice between security and our values. The State Department, in coordination with Homeland Security and the FBI, has a rigorous screening process that is far more thorough than the background checks conducted for tourists or other visitors to this country. We encourage our federal leaders to act responsibly and consistently with American values, and to avoid actions that would betray our nation's principles and put our country at greater risk. These are our brothers and sisters. These are our children. To turn our backs on them at their moment of greatest need would be to abandon our ideals and feed the very narrative that the terrorist organizations are trying to create. Reaffirming our nation's commitment to being a place that welcomes refugees is not just a principled stand. It is also important for our national security. We have answered this call before. We welcomed Jews fleeing Europe during the Second World War. We welcomed Vietnamese refugees at the fall of Saigon. We, even today, are welcoming those fleeing the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. These migrations have benefited America enormously, renewed our energy, strengthened our economy. Immigrants and refugees make our region more resilient and vibrant and dynamic by sparking innovation and contributing to our rich culture. We are one of the most prosperous places in the country, not in spite of immigrants, but because of them. I want to thank President Obama, our congressional representatives, and Governor Inslee for reinforcing our shared commitment and demonstrating leadership and courage. Together we'll ensure that our region remains a place where America is a beacon of hope and not a prisoner of fear. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Seattle Mayor Ed Murray.
We've had a slight adjustment in the order. Adam Smith is here, and Adam was one of those on Thursday last week who voted no. Adam?
Well, I want to thank Jim, the county executive, and the mayor for organizing this event. And I think it is incredibly important that we understand the refugee crisis in its proper context. And I can't improve upon what Dow said about the importance of immigrants to our country and the strength that they bring us. And the fact that we welcome them is, one of the things that makes us great and separates us from so much of the rest of the world. But as the ranking member in the Armed Services Committee, I also want to point out the national security implications of this and the irony of the fact that so many people are trying to block these refugees out of the belief that this is somehow going to better protect us as a nation. Well, there's two very important things to understand about that. First has been mentioned, and that is the vetting process that you go through to come in as a refugee in the first place. It takes anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. It is very long and it is very thorough. And regrettably, as we have learned in the Western world, in the US and elsewhere, groups like Daesh and Al-Qaeda can threaten us from people homegrown and born. So we can't just say, well, as long as we block the refugees, we can stop worrying. In fact, if we obsessively focus on them, if our intelligence apparatus and the FBI focus on them, they can very well miss people who threaten us here. It's focusing on the wrong thing. And the refugees are the one group of people that is very, very thoroughly vetted. But beyond that, you have to really understand what these violent extremist ideologies like Al-Qaeda and Daesh are trying to do. They are trying to create a world where it is the West versus Islam. They want to hold themselves out as the defender of their religion against Western aggression. So when we say we don't want Muslims here, when we say we don't want people from Arab countries here, we feed right into that message. And make no mistake about it, if you look at the social media messages that Daesh is putting out, this is what they're saying. They're saying that refugees are not wanted in the Western world, that they are not treated well. That is why Daesh has to fight against the Western world. So when we pass a bill that says, you know what, we don't want any of the Syrian refugees here, we feed into the very message that we are trying to defeat. And please understand that we could kill as many terrorists as you could possibly count. It's the ideology that matters. It matters if they are able to convince their people that their ideology is the only place to turn, and that is what we have to avoid feeding into at all costs. We have to show them that no, we are not like that. We are opening and welcoming. And right here in my community, in the 9th District that I'm pleased to represent, we have people from over 150 nations represented in this district. They are vibrant members of our community. They make our community incredibly strong, and they are assets to what we're doing here, from all manner of different religions as well. That is our strength. So when we exclude people based on where they are from, we undercut our strength and we play into the message of our enemies. So I hope that the Senate will not allow this House bill to pass. That President Obama's statements will go forward, and we will accept refugees through the process that we have. And make no mistake about it, there is a process. People who are coming into this country are vetted. That process should happen, but we should be open and welcoming, because remember, these people are fleeing the very violence that we are trying to stop. They are the victims of this far more than we have. We should welcome them, and we should show Dash and the whole rest of the world exactly what the United States of America is about. So thank you for the chance to be here, and again, I want to thank the people who organized this. I think it's very important that we get this message out.
The reason we chose this spot is because behind us is the 9/11 memorial to the people who died in New York. So it seemed appropriate that the mayor be here today to say his part. Ed?
Good morning, and yes, welcome to the Seattle Center. When this was created in 1962, it was about welcoming the world to the city of Seattle. Seattle was an open city then, and it is an open city today. As Congressman Smith mentioned, there's 150 different countries, at least 150 different countries, where people have come to live in the city of Seattle. 1 out of every 5 Seattleites is either an immigrant or a refugee. These are difficult and challenging times, and I realize that many in America are afraid. But we must not give in to our fears. This country and this city is greatest when we keep our doors open, not build walls. Syrians and refugees and immigrants from around the world are welcome in this city. This city has a history that has been mixed at times, but again, we are at our best when we are keeping people here and welcoming them here, not putting them in camps. I also want to acknowledge and thank the mayor of Jersey City, Stephen Follett, who is an Iraqi war veteran, for speaking up against Donald Trump's grotesque and slanderous statements of the last few days about Muslim Americans in New Jersey and in America. Again, we can give in to our fears, or we can be like Mayor Follett in Jersey City and remind people that it is the Muslim community that is enriching us today, as my grandparents who came from Ireland enriched us as one time, as Jewish Americans, Latino Americans, on and on and on. That is the American story. You know, when my grandparents came in on a boat in New York Harbor, I don't know if they saw the words on the Statue of Liberty, but I thought it was worth reading them today, because I don't think anything describes what America is about and how welcoming we are. And whether it's the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor where they're written, or our own Statue of Liberty on Alki that symbolizes those beliefs, it's worth repeating them. In part they read, "Mother of exile, from her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send me the homeless, tempest tossed to me, and I will lift up my lamp beside the golden door." That is who we are, that is who we will be. Thank you, Congressman McDermott, for pulling us together.
Next, Jorge Barron will speak for the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project.
Thank you, Representative McDermott, and thank you all for being here. I want to begin by just pointing out how fortunate we are in our region to have leaders like Congressman McDermott and Smith, Executive Constantine, Mayor Murray, and all the political leaders that are here with us today, as well as Governor Inslee, who have made clear that our city, our county, and our state are welcoming places where we recognize the wisdom and the justice of opening our doors to refugees and immigrants. These leaders stand in stark contrast to far too many other political leaders, including sadly some here in Washington state. Now, those other leaders have found it all too easy to exploit tragedy and to play on people's fears. They think they can further their own ambitions by seeking to divide our communities, but that is not leadership. Leadership is standing up for our core values, and I am proud that the leaders of our region display that type of leadership. Now, there has been much misinformation about the issue of Syrian and Iraqi refugees, and I feel like it's important to emphasize a few points, some of which have been made already. And particularly this issue that we need to reject that false choice that too many are presenting between national security and a refugee program. I think we've heard this, but I want to emphasize it. The first reason that it's a false choice is what we've heard today, that refugees from all countries, including from Syria and Iraq, already go through intense security screenings and checks. And again, this particular group is more thoroughly vetted than anybody else who's coming into the United States. But the second point, and Congressman Smith alluded to this, is that turning back on our refugees from Syria and Iraq actually poses a much greater risk to our national security than a welcoming stance. U.S. leadership around the world depends not just on military might, but equally, if not more, on our being recognized as a leader in human rights. If we turn our back on refugees at this time, and particularly if we're doing so on the basis of religion, such a stance would be far more harmful and riskier than if we continue to welcome people who have gone through a careful vetting process. I think it's also a false choice because when people perceive that national security is only about certain communities and people have become afraid of law enforcement, that actually makes it less likely that people are going to report and provide the critical information that law enforcement and our intelligence agencies need. So it's particularly important that we not divide communities at this time. I also think it's really important that we stand here together to loudly reject the notion that Muslim refugees are less deserving of protection than others, or that Muslims cannot fully integrate into our communities. Frankly, it should not even have to be said, but I think it's important to emphasize that the reality, of course, is that American Muslims share our country's strong family values and are dedicated to raising and educating their children. American Muslims want to succeed in the traditional American way by working hard and supporting their families. There are thousands of Muslim children growing up across our state and millions across our nation. They are now looking to fair-minded leaders to be true champions for millions of young American Muslims so that they, when they turn on the TV or open a newspaper, the messages they hear are that American Muslims' lives and contributions are just as valuable, and they have the right to grow up with the same hopes and dreams as any other young American. And so I'm calling on many more fair-minded leaders to publicly and vocally stand up and affirm American values of religious freedom, publicly and vocally tell stories of the lives and contributions of American Muslims they know, and join us in reminding our fellow Americans that while some may try to divide us, we are and always will be Americans. And now I'm pleased to welcome Fe Lopez, who's the current president of our partners at One America, as well as Lorena Gonzalez, who is a past president of One America, but also in a few hours will be our latest Seattle City Council member. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I also like to mention that she's also be the first of Latino descent, and her parents are immigrants to this country as well. Thanks for this opportunity to speak today. As Jorge said, I am Fe Lopez. I'm the president of the board of directors of One America, formerly Hate Free Zone. One America is the state's largest immigrant advocacy organization working across race and ethnicity to build power and promote democracy in immigrant and refugee communities. A little more than 14 years ago, State Senator Pramila Jayapal, the founder of Hate Free Zone, now One America, worked with Congressman McDermott and others under similar circumstances to generate a response to the hate and discrimination directed toward Muslim, Arab, Middle Eastern, East African, and South Asian residents of Washington in the aftermath of 9/11. One America has on to do much more, but our roots will always be in ensuring that our American values are lived up to, and that we present a clear alternative to hate and discrimination, that of love and justice. By embracing love and justice as an organization and as a community, we've shown that a different response of collective movement building is possible, where all people are welcome to our state regardless of where they were born. Fear is a very powerful thing. We have seen throughout our history, and many of the moments where we've diverged most from our American values are when we allow fear, hate, and intolerance to drive policy decisions and divide communities. We cannot let this happen again. Not in our country, not in our state, and not in our city. We applaud our Washington state elected officials who have used their power to unite instead of divide. Elected officials like those standing with our community today, Congressman McDermott, King County Executive Constantine, Mayor Murray, and Senator Jayapal, who would have been here today, but she is out of the country. And elected like Governor Jay Inslee, who have used their power to lead our state and our nation in a compassionate response that recognizes the humanity we share and embraces those seeking refuge, again, with love and justice. At the 10-year anniversary celebration of Hate-Free Zone's founding, the event was titled, "Let America Be America Again," after the famous Langston Hughes poem. Those words which ring true today. Yet, I am the one who dreamt our basic dream, in the world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings, and every brick and stone, and every furrow turned, that's made America that it has become. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Arsalan Bukhari, the Executive Director. Oh, sorry. Lorena Gonzalez, sorry.
Thank you, Fred. So we thank you so much to Congressman McDermott for having us here and for bringing us together on this very important issue. You saw Congressman McDermott hold up the sign, Hate-Free Zone. We changed our name from Hate-Free Zone to One America several years ago in 2009. And the reason we did that as an organization, as the largest human rights, immigrant rights, civil rights organization in the state, is because we believe in exactly what our name says. We are a hate-free zone, but we are more than that. We are one America, and we can be that. We can continue to be that. It is only fitting that we stand here today in the 9/11 garden at Seattle Center. It is a reminder during these difficult times that the balance of democracy and justice against exclusion and oppression is a delicate, fragile balance. We have an opportunity before us right now as Americans, as a city, as a state, as a county, as a country, to be true to our values of opportunity, freedom, and refuge, to those principles of love and justice. We've had a history in our nation of excluding immigrants. In Seattle, that impacted Japanese Americans. In our nation, it's impacted the Irish, Italians, and certainly Latinos. Right now is the moment to learn from history, which includes learning from the mistakes that have led to discrimination and exclusion. I am the child of parents who were once undocumented from Mexico. Every time Donald Trump spews his hatred, I think about the fact that he's talking about my parents and millions more. And there are no bounds to his hatred, as he is now targeting Muslim Americans and those who seek to be Muslim Americans in our country. We cannot permit that to happen, and I am incredibly proud that we are here today to stand up loudly against that type of hatred. And let me tell you, had there not been an opportunity for my parents to settle in this country and adjust their status, I would not stand before you today as council member-elect for Seattle City Council. I urge our community to soften their hearts and understand that we can have national security and be an inclusive America. We cannot live in a society where those that are fleeing from persecution are universally painted with the broad stroke of also being persecutors. That would not be the America or Seattle we all love. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Arslan Bukhari, Executive Director of Council on Immigrant Islamic Relations and friend.
Thanks, Faye, and thanks to the leadership of Mayor Ed Murray, Council Member Yal Constantine, Representative Adam Smith, and of course, Congressman Jim McDermott, who inspires us every day with his words and his actions. American Muslims share our country's strong family values, dedicated to raising and educating our children. American Muslims want to succeed in the same traditional American way by working hard and supporting their families. And there's nothing more basic, more fundamental, or even quite frankly, more conservative than guaranteeing each and every American an equal opportunity to work hard and support their families. Our support of our fellow Americans comes from our faith values that we should treat others the way we want to be treated. This is about how we as people treat others. God called us to love each other. It is our job to love all God's children. American Muslims share the same American values and freedoms that we all cherish, knowing that we are all in this together. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, about 20,000 American Muslims are serving honorably in our nation's armed forces, and many have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country, including Specialist Kareem Khan, Major James Ahern, Specialist Rashid Sahib, and Captain Humayun Khan. There are about 100,000 American Muslims in our state of Washington, and there are many thousands right here in Seattle who every day, inspired by their faith, give back to society. Muslims here are Americans in their hearts, and in fact, most are born or raised as U.S. citizens. And every day, thousands of American Muslim public school teachers like Sobia Sheikh at Cascade Middle School in Everett and Nadia Samad at Tesla STEM High School in Bellevue are engaging and inspiring the next generation of Americans. And every day, thousands of American Muslim law enforcement officials like Seattle Police Department Sergeant Yanel Vuch and his wife Ella Dani are working every day to keep us all safe. And right here in JBLM, we have American Muslims serving honorably as active duty military personnel, and thousands more American Muslims like Benjamin Shabazz are proud U.S. military veterans. Thousands of American Muslim nurses like Salima Osman at Harborview are providing compassionate care, and thousands of American Muslims are business people and in many other roles, building our nation's vibrant economy. These are the American Muslims I know. They're upstanding citizens and exemplify the best of America. Like millions of American Muslims nationwide, they share the same American values and freedoms that we all cherish, knowing that we are all in this together, and they participate actively in mainstream society. There are thousands of American Muslim children growing up across our state and millions across our nation. They are now looking for fair-minded leaders to be true champions by standing up and affirming American values of religious freedom, and by vocally and publicly standing at every opportunity that American Muslim children have the right to the same aspirations, the same hopes and dreams as every other young American. So that when millions of young American Muslims turn on the TV or on their smartphone read the news, the messages they hear from fair-minded business leaders and political leaders are that American Muslims' lives and contributions are just as valuable, and they have the right to grow up with the same dreams and hopes as every other young American. And so today, I'm here to ask many more fair-minded leaders and to publicly and vocally stand up and affirm American values of religious freedom, and publicly and vocally tell stories of the lives and contributions of the American Muslim families and children they know, to give hope to young Muslims across our country. And I'm asking fair-minded leaders to also join us in reminding our fellow Americans that while some may try to divide us, we are and always will be Americans, united as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As you just heard, there's really a whole crowd of people not standing here who wanted to be here. Jay Inslee sent a statement, and Senators Murray and Cantwell sent statements. Susan DelBene, Denny Heck, and Congressman Larson all wanted to be here but could not for one reason or another. Some members of the state legislature actually showed up. Tana Sen is here behind me from the 41st district. She fought the traffic to come over the ridge. And Strom Peterson came down from Edmonds. There are a lot of people who believe in what we're doing today. And we want that message to go out strong and clear and unequivocally that we welcome immigrants to this city. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for the press for standing here and freezing to death, but this is a message that needs to go out. Thank you. We would be glad to answer a few questions if you have some. I know my colleagues are freezing back here, but if anybody has a question, I would share. I actually, Adam Smith and I talked a little bit about this. You cannot deny people's fears. You have to acknowledge them and embrace them and say, we are doing everything that we possibly can. You would like to be able to say, I can make you totally safe. Nothing will ever happen to you. But in our hearts, we know that's not true. But we're doing everything we can, and in fact, I was remarking the other day to someone about the election of 2014. Do you remember what was the major issue leading up to that election? Well, it was the fact that the president had not protected us from the Ebola virus. All you heard about everywhere was the Ebola virus. But the president acted through the CDC, he acted using his agencies, and there was no Ebola virus in this country. That's what's going on here. There may be, as someone has said, some homegrown. Timothy McVeigh didn't come from Saudi Arabia. He didn't come from wherever. He was from here. So our intelligence agencies and police agencies are doing everything they can. And it is not that they sort of, well, let's just let anybody come in here. That's not what's going on here. We're doing, the president and we're all trying to do the very best we can. And I think if people can't understand that, I'm not quite sure how you help them, because nobody can promise you, Mr. Trump or any of the others who say, let's keep everybody out. It just doesn't work. You can't promise that.
Just a quickie for you. I noticed the president used the word Daesh. You used the word Daesh. Is that a collective decision over ISIS, or what's behind that, the change of terminology there?
The linguistic stuff really doesn't matter that much. We bounce all around it. We don't, the reason calling them Daesh is you don't want to give them the title that they have aspired to. That it's a word that means a different thing. But the terminology really isn't altogether that important. We debate that back and forth. It's really more about the ideology. And just, two quick points on that. One internationally and one following up on Jim's comment. I think what we ultimately need to do to defeat this group is to give a better alternative. One of the reasons that Daesh grew up was because of what happened with the Baghdad government. That it became sectarian, Shia, blocked out the Sunnis, didn't give them any legitimate place to go. This ideology stops when moderate Sunni Muslims have a reasonable alternative and a reasonable government to follow. And we've seen some progress. Tunisia has made enormous strides in improving its governance. So we've got to be comprehensive in our approach to make sure that we provide those reasonable alternatives. And as far as the local security is concerned, I agree completely with what Jim said. There are no guarantees. Our intelligence services are working hard, and I don't want anyone to misunderstand. There is a terrorist threat. Daesh, Al-Qaeda, many groups would love to strike at the United States, and our security forces need to work hard to try to prevent that. But putting up walls and blocking one group of people or another group of people does not help that. It takes the eye off the ball. You've got to look at the entire threat environment and not, imagine that Syrian refugees, stop them and everything's fine. It's not. We have got to comprehensively confront the terrorist threat that comes at us, number one. And number two, it is worth pointing out, as Jim alluded to with Tim McVeigh, I mean, we have gun violence in this country. I mean, regrettably, how many weeks go by before we have some sort of mass shooting somewhere? When it comes to protecting our communities, there is a lot that we need to work on. And thinking that an obsessive focus on terrorism, and if we can somehow stop that, look, you know, safety and security is a full-time job. You know, the mayor will tell you that, chief of police will tell you that. You know, and it's not just about terrorism. It's about a whole lot of other issues that we need to work on. Yeah, well, they're kind of wrong about that. First of all of these folks come through the United Nations. I forget the initials there. Sorry. These people do not come directly from Syria. None of these refugees simply, you know, hop on a plane in Syria and fly to the United States. They go to a UNHCR, there we go, High Commission on Human Rights, on Refugees, place where they've probably been there for quite a while. So they are screened, first of all, by UNHCR, and then they are screened by us. By the Department of Homeland Security and a variety of different others to verify identity, to verify background, a whole host of issues. So it is not accurate to say that there is no way to screen these people because they're coming out of Syria and Syria is in chaos. There is a way to screen them, and we've done it and done it quite effectively. And we've had an enormous refugee population here in the U.S. from a whole lot of different places. So we have a lot of practice at it, and we're very good at it. Now, as Jim said, can we guarantee you that one of these people won't at some point turn? In fact, I heard Newt Gingrich make an odd point the other day. I was watching Fox, and how President Obama had said, "What are you afraid of, orphans for?" He pointed out that the bombers at the Boston Marathon were actually children when they came here, like I think 9 or 13, I forget the ages. And I guess his point was, no, you can't bring in children because they could become a threat. There's a whole series of issues that go into that, but no 7-year-old, the Daesh is not sending a 7-year-old over here to wait, 20 years to attack us. What happened with the Boston Marathon, they became radicalized after they got here. They didn't come to this country with a pre-planned idea to attack us, which is why I say we have to comprehensively go after the ideology, go after what motivates people, because groups like Daesh are as capable of radicalizing a born and raised U.S. citizen as they are of radicalizing a Syrian refugee. So regrettably, we, to protect ourselves from this threat environment, we got a whole lot of different places that we've got to look at and do. And the refugees of the groups, of the people that we're worried about, they're about as well vetted as anyone who's going to be in this country through that process that I described. Thanks.
With the State Department's travel warning yesterday, do you have any message for people who are traveling this week?
I'll let the State Department speak for itself. I hope that people will continue to travel. I hope that people won't give in to fear and terror. Like I said, there's a lot of things to be afraid of that don't have anything to do with terrorism. And if you're going to live your life in fear of what bad thing that could happen, then I'd say you just hole up in your house and never leave. But you can have a heart attack. So who knows? Live your life. Be cautious about it. Be wise about where you go, but that applies terrorism or no terrorism. So I think the State Department just wants people to know what's going on, but I hope people will continue to live their lives. Thank you. Thanks.
Just give you a little personal touch on the question you just asked about Americans traveling. I was standing here getting ready to come up here and start this press conference, and I got a phone call from my brother from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia saying that his trip was going to go through Cairo. What did I think? Should he go through Cairo or should he go straight to Heathrow and come home? So it is affecting all of us. We all are concerned about these issues. It's not that we don't care. It's that we're not going to say, because you are a Muslim and go to a mosque, you can't come to America. Think about what that says to the world and what it says to those Muslims who are in this country. That's what's wrong and why it's a moral issue that has to be resisted. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you. Have a great Thanksgiving.